Yeah. So good afternoon, friends. Very warm welcome to all. Today we will discuss and deliberate on are you future employed from renewable and energy perspective. Let me give you my brief introduction. I am Kaushik Tanti, co-founder and director at Enrich Energy. Enrich is engaged into executing turnkey and EPC solar power projects. Along with, we provide operation and maintenance services, trade of renewable energy under open access, and renewable energy certificate trade at IEX and PXIL. I'm pleased to introduce three eminent panelists today from renewable and energy industry. Let me welcome Mr. Srini Viswanathan. He is joining us from Singapore. He is a CEO at Vibrant Energy Holding and focused in developing renewable energy assets in CNI segment across Southeast Asia. In past, he was leading Sun Edison, India's CNI business, where he led the growth of India's initial rooftop and CNI open access portfolio. Prior to that, he was the country head and managing director for Solesa Solar Engineering that provided rooftop and utility scale EPC services across India, Middle East, and Africa. At Solesa, he implemented an innovative solar diesel hybrid project for SMEs. Srini started his solar finance and development career by being a founding employee for Sol Systems, where he helped in building a mezzanine solar funding fund in Washington, D.C. He completed his MBA from Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth and started his career at UBS Investment Bank for industrial and renewable energy clients. Previously, he worked for 10 years in the IT services industries as international sales manager. Welcome, Srini Viswanathan. We
Thank
have
you very
our
much.
second, we have our second panelist, Mr. Pratyush Thakur. He is associate director at Macquaire Capital. Pratyush is a mechanical engineer from Delhi College of Engineering and MBA from IIT Delhi. He has held leadership positions in renewable energy and power trading companies in the past. He also has been felicitated by several agencies and one as one of the top solar leaders of the country. He lives in Bangalore with his wife and two super active kids. Welcome, Pratyush. We have our
Thank you.
third panelist today, Mr. Amit Deshpande. Amit Deshpande has 20 years of experience in business development, strategy, and business transformation in Middle East, Africa, and India. With focus on distributed power generation, Amit currently heads the infrastructure business for Rolls-Royce Power System across Middle East and North Africa with responsibility for power generation, oil and gas, microgrid, and energy storage. Prior to joining Rolls-Royce, Amit held various roles at Cummins Inc., focusing on mission critical applications. Amit takes interest in data science, corporate innovation, and is an angel investor in multiple startups. Amit studied his Bachelor of Electrical Engineering from Pune and holds an MBA from London Business School. I once again welcome all the fellow panelists and the audience who are online today to view this session. Let me set the context of our today's discussion. As you all are aware that we are in the midst of COVID-19 crisis, which has compelled global lockdown, and the government across the countries have taken proactive steps with the lockdown and already we are facing a situation where inside the lockdown we are thinking about how our future prospects would be. So barring few industries, all the businesses are under the lockdown situation. The economic paper suggests that the GDP growth would be slightly lesser or maybe a significant lesser compared to 4.6 that was projected earlier. Now we see the GDP somewhere around 1.8% to 2%. So there is a significant changes in the demand side that is projected, and all the businesses will get affected to the extent of COVID-19. On the other hand, India has an ambitious plan to achieve 175 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2022, which includes 100 gigawatt of solar, 60 gigawatts of wind energy, 10 gigawatt from biomass power, and 5 gigawatt from small hydro. If we see the present status of installed capacity, the country as a whole has an installed capacity of 372 gigawatt, which comprises renewable and other fossil fuel-based power generation systems. Out of the complete 372 gigawatt, around 135 gigawatt comes from the renewable, that is around 36%. So I'm including a large hydro also into the renewable basket, which is around 45 gigawatt. But if we keep the large hydros away from the renewable basket, then it is around 90 gigawatt of renewable energy installed on the ground. And there are two major contributors into the renewable energy segment. Solar is contributing around 36 gigawatt, and wind is contributing around 38 gigawatt. These are the numbers that I'm talking about installations till March of this 2020. So, and the other contributors are the biopower, small hydro, and waste to energy project. So, if we compare our national solar mission, which talks of 175 gigawatt by 2022, and look at the ground install condition, there is a huge gap. So, it gives a huge opportunity that we have to aggressively work, and we have to change our ways to achieve those targets. So it's a far journey. Today we are at around, let's say, 90 gigawatt, and we have to reach around 175 gigawatt. And this 90 gigawatt has been achieved in last couple of decades. If we see the first decade of 2010, wind was quite dominant. We seen a very good rise in wind installations, and most of the installations started coming in those 2001 to 2010 era, where we had the installations largely coming up to 26 or 27 gigawatt in that time frame only. After that, maybe in last 10 years, we have seen solar rising up very quickly, and solar has added very quickly 36 gigawatt in last around 9 to 10 years. So let us understand from our panelists what's the present status, what could be the impact of COVID-19, and what are the future employment prospects in RE segment. I would like our esteemed panelists to give their views on the subject, and let me first ask Mr. Pratyush on how he see the present and the global and the Indian demand for the renewable energy, and how are the prospects for renewable energy going forward. Mr. Pratyush, you can please take it from here.
Yeah, Kaushik. I would like to build upon what you mentioned in your opening note. There is a pretty significant opportunity for India to build more capacities in renewable energy. You already laid out the numbers. Now, what are the drivers for this growth? Of course, the government has set a target, and it has also in its INDCs to the world has mentioned that India wants to have 40% of its energy installed capacity by 2000 from renewables. And that basically gives us a number of much higher than 175 gigawatts if we have even a longer point of view. So by these targets, we could expect up to 300 gigawatts of renewable capacity by the end of 2030. As you rightly said, most of this growth has come in the last 2 decades, but the growth has been exponential in the last few years. And one of the key reasons for that is that these technologies, primarily wind and solar, are also competitive. 10 years back, you had to actually provide a significant amount of subsidy or higher tariff for solar to be commercially viable changed, and now solar energy is probably the cheapest source of energy which we have from an electricity generation standpoint. In addition to that, the market is also moving towards accepting solar PV both they are green as well as they provide a cheaper cost solution. So I am quite optimistic. I believe these short-term blips may create some issues, but on a longer term, the industry is pretty positive, and we should expect a lot of growth in industry. Thank you.
Yeah, we have Mr. Amit with us also. So, Amit, can you highlight your views on the present status and what is the impact of COVID-19 on this and on the growth prospects of renewable?
Sure. Thank you, Kaushik, and thank you, Pratyush, for starting. Yeah, I think the way I would like to start the discussion from my end is, what are the really the drivers of this energy transition that we see globally. So I would just like to quickly summarize the four drivers which we see as a majority of the you know key areas. So first is globalization. I think I don't have to explain globalization, what it means, but today the world is so much connected, and I think it's very well proven by the fact the way the COVID-19 has spread so rapidly and across the world that no country is now pretty much unaffected. All we have this spread to 170 countries. So likewise, from an energy perspective, also, we are all connected and interdependent. So that's a major trend. Second is, I would say, decarbonization. Climate change is a big factor. Reduction of CO2, carbon emissions, greenhouse gases are, I think everybody is conscious about this. With the Paris Agreement, most of the countries have ratified and, signed up. Uh, yes, so, there are other technologies like energy efficiency or hydrogen, biomass, carbon capture, but definitely renewable has a big role to play in this decarbonization. The third is electrification, and I think again, electrification has been around for now probably over 100 years. Someone mentioned that it was probably the greatest engineering achievement of the 20th century. Uh, you know, Primarily electrification is all about whatever in the past we were using different fuels or technologies like a diesel engine or a steam or other modes of powering is now being done by electricity. So that's electrification is the third uh, trend, I would say. And finally, I would like to summarize it with digitalization. So digitalization is again a key trend. And again, what we are doing today, the webinars, everything is now online and interconnected. So with these four trends, which are driving, so let us look at it from this perspective. Uh, the trends are the fundamental drivers. They were the same before COVID, and have they changed? Not really. The drivers still remain the same. So what are the challenges other than these that other than the drivers being not affected? I think some of the challenges that we see on the renewable energy side is, especially I will talk from a Middle East perspective, is we have a supply chain disruption, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of companies, or I mean most of the projects were depending on China, and when it comes to solar as a primary source, and now everybody has to think of what option do we have other than China as well, right? So this is one thing. Funding and finance risks are obviously there. Uh, but again, there is a positive side to it, with the compounding effect of the oil that we see in the region. Now probably the countries or the Middle East countries might spend their dollar on investing in renewable energy rather than subsidizing the oil that they were providing to the local consumers. So this is another side of it. Uh, the third is the the funding. I mean, most of the Middle Eastern and global projects we can see are funded by international financiers as well as the local state funding. And this is something that might see a slowdown in the short term, but the long term prospects are definitely there. And finally, now the impact of demand. Yes, definitely there is a slower demand that we see right now. However, in the long run, this should not really affect the commitment of the project developers and the government to go ahead with the plans. That's a quick start from my side.
Yeah, thank you, Amit. Let us now hear the views from Mr. Srini. So
Yeah,
we can have your views, sir.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for having me here. And I think you guys have covered almost all aspects of the drivers and given the industry snapshot. I think I can, to lack the reputation, what I can actually focus on is in terms of the post-COVID space. I think one of the things that has been interesting is we have seen that the energy consumption has dropped drastically across the country, given that there is less manufacturing going on, and then there's also dependability on thermal assets, fuel linkages with global linkages, and there's so much impact of global linkages on your current energy mix. Of course, reduction of oil is good for the country, but also not to an extent that it hits zero or goes negative. But then, in all our current, even today, we see that all our solar and wind assets are performing really well, and they are meeting the requirements for the country. And I think this is a unique opportunity for when we come out of post-COVID. One of the common things that is happening across the world is stimulus, and the government, every government, be it the US, Europe, any government will have to focus on stimulus. And when they start focusing on stimulus, energy space will also require stimulus, but at that time it doesn't really make sense to give stimulus to the thermal space or the nuclear space, but most rather on the renewable energy space, because that is what you're doing to uh, expand the footprint in India. And so the renewable energy players are very ready today with with the experience and the knowledge and the and the track record. And I think with the required government focus on the sector, I think we should be able to hit at least close to the targets that Kaushik you spoke about.
Yeah, thank you, Srini. Uh, See, if we do the some number work, then in the last decade, what we have added is around 36 gigawatt of solar. So going forward, we have just left with 2 years. That's 2022. We'll have to cover up, around 60 plus gigawatt of solar installation to meet 100 gigawatt of a target. Same way, there could be another 15 gigawatt of wind addition to reach up to the 60 gigawatt milestone. So definitely, I understand from being the industry and you all that infrastructure is one of the limitation factor. So if you just have heard the recent announcement where MNRE said that they will extend the solar park from 20 gigawatt to 40 gigawatt. So how you take up this thing, like getting from 20 gigawatt of a solar park to a 40 gigawatt would help the industry. Yeah, Mr. Shri, you can take up this one. You are on mute.
I think one of the very clear indicators that you actually pointed out also in your opening remarks was that at the end of the day, I saw a recent statistic that of all the countries in the world today, even with the COVID, there are only 4 countries that are going to have any growth, and India actually tops that 4 country with 2% estimate. This is the IMF projection. where India is going to have a much higher growth rate than China, even in the post-COVID situation for the next year and a half. So, with that kind of scenario, there will require to be tremendous focus on new investments in industry, in investments, shifting of supply chains from all other parts from China, especially to India. There is going to be a large requirement on the requirement for energy infrastructure. And even if you say at a 40 gigawatt, if they have to promote so 40 gigawatt, if you actually see from a from a PLF basis, it's only almost 8 gigawatt. You're not really in a country where you actually have 330 odd gigawatts. You're only adding another technically 8 gigawatt of solar, which is a drop in the bucket in a way. So you're not
Yeah.
really. It is still good enough, good enough focus for improving the renewable energy assets in the country, but it's not for immediately going to replace any large amount of energy infrastructure. It's going to help in adding more renewable energy assets into the space.
Thank you. Uh, One more, again, a worrying point is the depreciation of rupee. So I would like to know from Pratyush how depreciating rupee is impacting the viability of projects that you are planning, and uh, what's your take on it going forward? Pratyush, you have to unmute yourself.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is an impact of rupee depreciation for sure, because let's take solar energy. A significant portion of solar modules and cells we are importing in the country right now. And hence, there is a direct relation to the capital cost or the capital expenditure you would have for setting up the projects. So there is quite a significant impact, especially on solar. We do have wind manufacturing capacity in India, so I think wind is relatively insulated compared to solar. But this is something which all project developers do assume as a part of the business risk, and do prepare themselves for this. What has also helped, I don't know if it's very positive or not, but due to relatively muted demand for new solar installation globally, there is some impact on the module price as well, which means that the module price has also, on a dollar basis, reduced slightly. So the total effect has not been very significant for new project construction, uh, but there is a direct correlation, if I may say. About 60 to 70% of project cost for solar in India is related to the foreign exchange rate of dollar and rupee. So I think that would have a pretty significant impact on the viability of these projects.
And how Srini, you take up this depreciating rupee concern for your projects?
It is definitely a concern. I think the only advantage that India has um, from a market standpoint is that we are potentially a growth market. So even if we end up investing, let's say 10 million today, you execute those megawatts, and then after you end up taking debt on the books or whatever, you're able to, or with cash from the books, you're able to invest more quickly. So you have more turn of that cash. So that multiple growth opportunities that you have helps you to uh, offset some of the hit that India generally takes with constant depreciation of the rupee. Uh, and that's why it's unlike a typical yield market where you say that I'll get X amount of return every year. India basically says I get an X amount of return, but I also add an X amount of growth to that market. So I think we'll have to analyze India from that lens and not from the lens of just pure way of just looking at, oh, rupee depreciated, so we have lost money.
So one interesting statistics that I was also going through, like in 2017, we did fairly close to 10 gigawatt of solar. Then in the 2018 and 2019, and if we just look at the last year numbers, which is around 7.5 gigawatt. So our pace has of installing the project has little bit come less. Maybe around we have seen around 10% reduction in the annual installed capacity year on year basis. Uh, we have come across certain issues in the sector, that was the implementation of safeguard duty. At that point of time, a certain gigawatt of projects were auctioned out, and that did not had much of a provision to take up this type of a jerk, which was to the extent of 20 or 25% put together. And now with the revised plan, in a way, it was a better for a country that we have to take an active step in manufacturing in the complete value chain, right from the ingot up to the wafer to the cell and the module level. So in a way, the journey has started, and what I hear from leading solar panel manufacturers, that they are in a process of setting up the cell manufacturing facilities close to 2 gigawatt, 1 gigawatt, likewise. So maybe country can see a 5 gigawatt of cell manufacturing in this couple of years. So that's a good point. And the continuation, maybe what the government may be planning is to take out the safeguard duty and then implement a basic custom duty, which may have a level playing field again. You take it from one basket and you put it into the other basket. At the end of the day, you are giving certain protection to the domestic manufacturers to scale up, and and the DCR content tenders would certainly help those manufacturers to get established for a couple of years and take up on a higher way. Now, all said and done, the impact of COVID, we all have been trying to understand how it would be on a manufacturing segment, or what would be the impact on the service segment. So I would like to know from Amit that what are your views, like which is the segment which will get most affected in the value chain, whether it would be manufacturing segment that would get more affected, or maybe the service industries that would get affected. I'm talking about the immediate next 6 to 8 months or a year time frame. Yes, Amit.
Sure. Thank you, Kaushik. I think I think the impact is probably on all mostly all the sectors that we see. As I was mentioning in my earlier opening remark, supply chain has been affected because of the dependence on China. And what we are seeing now in the Middle East region is as well, the local governments are promoting local manufacturing. So they want a lot of in-country value add. They are creating incentives for manufacturers to come and set up local manufacturing base. So from a disruption standpoint, I think yes, a lot of the EPC work is labor intensive, and that kind of work can get also affected because of availability of the migrant workers who have left to travel back to their home countries or hometowns. If talking about India, so services, EPC sector is something that we see being affected as well. And but again, this is a sector that can also be ramped up pretty fast back again.
Okay. So I have certain more questions that were coming, certain from the audience side as well, and certain which we are speaking. Yeah, basically you've seen that India has been giving a platform for a lot of startups. So Make in India and startup has been, one of from the vision of our Prime Minister, that Indian youth need to venture out, and they should concentrate on the technology-oriented startups and venture into the manufacturing. So these startups, there are many startups which have come up in renewable. They are providing unique services into the from the IT domain also, the forecasting and the scheduling, like data management. There could be multiple of those ancillary services startup coming up also. So yeah, this is a tough time, and for the larger organizations also, and for the smaller organization also. So Pratyush, can you highlight what precautions exactly a startup should take up in a renewable energy, who is working in renewable energy?
Sure, I can try that. And startup again is such a wide you know landscape. You could be a startup in manufacturing, in construction. You could be an IPP as a startup where you've raised a lot of capital. You could be a technology startup where, as you're saying, you're providing technology services. Um, but in general, in stress times, especially when there is a financial stress, not having too much leverage is of quite good value, because then your external obligations are relatively low. Now, I really don't set out any recommendations because I'm not an economist. I can just say from my experience as a professional. But I would also add that startups could really have a long-term view and try to go past the storm which is there, and see at the longer term perspective. And why I'm saying that, let me expand my thought process and share with you that uh, the whole electricity market is changing, or it's already changed to a lot extent. If you remember 20, 30 years back, the electricity market was structured as a pretty large utility who would generate power either using the water or coal or nuclear. And then there'll be a big utility who will use the high transmission lines to deliver it to the cities and industries. And there'll be another large utility who would distribute this power ultimately to the customers. But now, due to change of market structure and also the advent of newer technologies, the the large utility model is shifting, where the power is shifting from large utilities to the customers. And the customers, by customers, I'm saying both industrial, commercial, as well as residential customer. That means that the market has to be redesigned and really think towards the most important proponent, which is the customer. And this creates a lot of opportunity on having technology solutions. For instance, smart meters. Smart meters can help you change the market design, the tariff structure, or forecasting and scheduling, where we are saying that the integration of large scale intermittent sources of power like wind and solar become easier, and also enable the grid operator to balance these powers well. So for the startups, there is a lot of opportunity which is coming up due to the change in the market design, and they should really look at what are the changes which are happening. I mean, the recent changes proposed in the draft electricity bill 2020 are quite interesting. We could have another session on that itself.
Yeah.
But if I were a startup, I would really look at the technology side and how can I enable, using my technology or having new technologies, enable this change from a large utility model to the market-based model.
Yeah, Amit.
So, I think Pratyush put it across very well, and I just like to add a few more things to it. So, from a startup perspective, I think the fundamentals that most of the companies need to adopt in these times pretty much remain the same across most of the domains, because as Pratyush mentioned, it's about conserving cash and liquidity to ensure you don't immediately lay off your critical resources, and you try and maintain them. How do you ensure the health of your employees? How do you build relationship, or keep stronger relationship with your suppliers, so that your supply chain is remaining robust and there is a continuity post COVID scenario as well. Then we can talk about uh, how do you assess the demand? Are the customer behaviors changing? And how can we make sure that post COVID the same customer behaviors will, we can predict them, and we can add service to them. So when Pratyush talked about new technology startups, I think there's a lot of these are some of the priorities that the startups need to maintain. But at the same time, there is a huge opportunity that is opening up, especially for technology enabled startups. So Pratyush touched upon a few of them, and I would like to mention there are startups that are doing peer-to-peer trading. This is something that is going to grow in the future. There are startups doing aggregation of the residential distributed power sources. So if I am generating, I have a rooftop solar, and if multiple people are doing that same thing, and if you can have a platform where this could be aggregated and sold, or we can raise funding against it, or there could be various different innovative business models that you can come up with. And then I think probably Srini will touch upon it at some stage. The technology of the storage is improving, and the costs are coming down. So storage as a service is also a business model that we are seeing more and more. So definitely, I think for startups, especially that are technology based, there is a huge opportunity, and this is the time for them to really go after it.
Yeah, thank you, Amit. So I think that was the next thing that I wanted to come upon. Just in a recent interaction with the MNRE officials, they on a public platform were trying to take up that now India will require dispatchable power from the renewables. So dispatchable power comes up with the energy storage. uh, Renewables being informed, we need to have a storage in some or the other format. Maybe it could be battery operated, it could be hydro, or it could be any other technology. So combining those technology, and they have an immediate plan of going some 400 megawatts of. They already tendered out one 2 gigawatt of tender, where I think couple of companies have got the project with the battery storage. It's some 800 megawatt or 1200 megawatt, like that distribution. So I think, Srini, if you can highlight on how the storage policy should be framed up, what the correct means, what should be the incentives that government should initially, and whatever the mistakes that we have made up in solar manufacturing, we don't repeat into the battery energy storage domain. And miss, your views, would like to have your views.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I think one of the key factors to analyze when we think of storage is that just like solar went through a learning curve, that we saw first PPAs of 17 rupees and then 11 rupees and then 10 rupees going down. But every time there was that price, there was a government program for a release of 100 gigawatt, 100 megawatt, or 500 megawatt, or 1 gigawatt. There were continuously some government tenders coming in, and companies were bidding at that price. At that time, obviously, the cost was high, and accordingly, the PPA price compensated for that cost. When the cost went down, we saw the price of PPAs going down as well. But we are seeing the same pattern emerging in the storage space as well. We have seen that in the last 3 years, there has been more than, I would say, 35 to 40% reduction in storage cost. And but part of that is also happening with a combination of a strong in many is happening in many countries across the world. In, like, for example, in the US, they have this concept called investment tax credit, which gives them a 30% tax credit. So even solar plus storage projects get a 30% tax credit. Similarly, there is a strong EV policy in China. There is a good EV policy in Australia. So one of the other onsets of while you have the moving storage, which is basically the electric vehicles kind of market. At the end of the day, there also needs to be a comprehensive policy on the stationary storage. So, for example, California has embarked on a 100% renewable energy mission, and they have set up programs where anybody who can invest in storage, they get a capacity charge. So for being available to the grid at all points in time to smoothen the grid, they get a charge, and that's a good business model. So there's a couple of those things, obviously, but these things can only happen when there is a strong government push to this sector, and they realize that this is the next solar war. Solar has grown to an extent. Today, obviously, we need to hit 100 plus gigawatt in storage in solar, but solar has become more of a commodity game. Now India needs to step up its opportunities to the next level of technology and the next level of energy technologies, and having a good plan of how storage can get into the mainstream is very important. And obviously, doing Make in India in storage, establishing more businesses there, encouraging startups with seed funds there will all be very welcome moves in that space.
Okay. Particularly, we don't have the reserves in terms of lithium. Basically, that's a driving factor for the energy storage business. Most of the companies that are well established in China, they are more bullish on LFP technology, and you've seen that the top ranked Chinese manufacturers in LFP, they are having gigawatt of factories. So likewise, yeah, we need some steps to rope in the basic raw material that is lithium, and then we can build upon our capacities. And we also heard that some of the Indian corporates are already trying up to set up some gigawatt factories. So let's see that we have some gigawatt of gigafactories coming in, just like China have, and we are able to compete quite better and offer a better tariff to the consumer.
Yeah, and also there are many multiple technologies that are coming in. So there is on while China has pushed lithium because they have really with the rapid manufacturing they have been able to bring down the cost curve in lithium. But for
Mhm.
example, Japan has always apart from Panasonic, which uses lithium, there is also
Mhm.
a push to sodium sulfur technology. In the
Mhm.
US, there are multiple technologies that use vanadium kind of. Flow battery technology. So there are a couple of other technologies, and there are new technologies in the work. So
Mhm.
obviously, in the R&D space, India has not been at the forefront. Maybe that
Mhm.
is also what you're saying is also indicating that India should also start thinking of being in the R&D space and collaborating with using the relationship they have with the US or Europe and other markets, China, other markets to kind of make sure we understand where the trend is tapering to so
Mhm.
that we invest wisely in that technology.
Yeah. One of the obvious question that is coming to the people's mind is like we are under a lockdown situation. What we should be doing right away? Should we focus on enhancing our skill and maybe in some technology areas, maybe on some business management areas? So my question to all of you, you will also be introspecting what are the things that we need to improve upon. So if you can enlighten our audience that this is a time where they should focus upon, what should they be able, uh, all the people who are into the renewables, they should be focusing upon in this lockdown time. So I think Amit, you can first start up with.
Yeah, sure. Again, for me, again, this is not only specific to the energy sector, but it pretty much applies to uh, most of the sectors. Is the trends, the changes that are coming through, right? So as we all talked about, digitization and technology plays a very important role now, and it will play more and more important role going forward in the energy sector. So I think it's time that we all keep ourselves updated with the new technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning. How how can you hear me well? There's no echo in between.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so how can we learn the tools about forecasting, and I mean all these new technologies. I think for me is very important for anybody to stay relevant and keep themselves up to date with new skills.
Yeah, Pratyush.
Sure, of course, we spoke about technology, but as all of us said, that a lot of installed capacity is going to come in the future, meaning a lot of capital would be required. And hence, one of the key skills I feel is financial skills, where you are able to create business models which can help these technologies to be attractive for both the market as well as the investors. So I think understanding the nuances of capital budgeting on the financial side, on how that works, And also on the commercial side, because as I mentioned earlier, the market is now changing towards the customers. Let's say one of the topics you touched about was dispatchability, right? And by dispatchability, we say that, okay, we should have round the clock
Around the
supply
clock.
of power from solar, right? Now,
Mhm.
that is one concept, of course, and that is a concept we have been living for decades. But why not? We have the ability to match the demand and supply profiles. How can we adjust the demand profile
Mhm.
which matches with the supply profile? So there is also a lot of work which can be done on the commercial structuring. Um, the government is already talking about financial contracts in the electricity markets, wherein you don't need to have the contracts linked to physical delivery. So I think there is a lot of opportunity to learn on both the financial side as well as the commercial structuring side, which we can pick up during this lockdown and maybe in the future to make these technologies and installed capacity more relevant for the market.
Yeah. And what's your take, Mr. Srini?
Actually, we it has been actually an interesting time for us. What we have done is, uh, you know, uh, we are spending more time around thinking very clearly about internal systems in the organization, and different teams have been formed. Of course, we have been working online through WebEx, we're kind of strengthening our internal systems and processes, and so that has become a that's keeping everybody busy thinking of how their organization will grow post COVID, what kind of systems will be there across the board. And I think the other things that we have done is we have asked people to come back with what kind of do a self introspection and come back with what kind of areas uh, that they need help with and improve. And we've used Coursera and Udemy and all these other tools to kind of see that people can actually do their research on courses and come back and discuss with HR as to which courses are valuable for them, why they would like to move on. And so because they have a lot more time on hand, that they can actually dedicate some few hours to get that done. So we're working on those things, and I think that message would apply to anybody else who is at home. Let's make sure you use your all your 8 hours of a day or 10 hours of a day to kind of think actively as to what you need to improve on, because this time won't come back again. And once the post COVID everything opens up, it'll be back to action, and you will not get this time this downtime again to kind of catch up on things.
Mhm. Okay. Uh, just was thinking about like what would be the future areas of inside the renewables which will have a certain niche advantages. Like we see that obviously energy storage is coming in. With that we have some microgrid projects also coming in. We have on forecasting and scheduling also coming in. So uh, what could be the employment prospects in this area? If yeah, Amit, if you can just highlight on that part.
Sure. So, I think the all the areas that you mentioned, Kaushik, microgrid, energy storage, hybrid projects, forecasting, uh, there's a lot of growth in these areas, and across the value chain, like Pratyush talked about financing. You need all types of skills that have to go
Mhm.
in this value chain. You have technology skills, you need the financing skills, you need the EPC, the electrical design, the on-site work. So I think this is a huge area of growth, and in fact, as a post-COVID scenario, this could be a potential area for the government to restart the economy. Because a lot of questions are being asked about how can we reboot the economies post COVID. So I believe that renewables and especially the new business models could play a major role in rebooting the economies by attracting foreign investment, as well as creating a lot of local work and employment opportunities that will go into this.
Yeah. So just to quote a simple example, some sort of relief was granted by the government to open up and start the renewable energy construction projects falling into the rural area. So the difficulties are there as well, because our most of the contractors that work into the EPC segment, they have their team which has diverse manpower across the India. So practically the contractors were willing to do the work, but due to the limitation of the manpower which is come across from India, and as per the guidelines, there was no interstate movement, or we had to pick and choose the technicians or the labor, or maybe from the local region, which sometimes become impractical to have at a one point. So though the relaxation is there, we couldn't commence with the construction of the project. But yes, the operation and maintenance are essential services that are going on, and the permits have been granted by the respective states. We are able to maintain all the projects very seamlessly. That's there. We have got good many questions from the audience as well. Uh, I will take up few questions and let's see. Yeah, we have a question from Mr. Amit Thakur. He's wanted to know what are the government support provided to us renewable or a power energy startup. So, can any expert take up on that point? Uh, yeah, Pratyush, you have some.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I can give a few pointers. Um, so there are several schemes under the MNRE which provide capital financial assistance, uh, especially for the small and medium sectors, medium industries. For the larger utility scale projects, I'm afraid we don't have too many incentives left. Also because the technology is quite competitive. But one of the key incentives which come to my mind is that power generation and renewable generation is considered as industry and manufacturing, which gives you certain benefits on the tax side. I don't really know if there's something to add, Srini or Amit. You may like to add something on this.
Yeah. Yeah, Srini, we can have you.
I've not seen. So obviously there is Startup India and a couple of other government kind of programs. There are some MNRE grants that show up on the website. Uh, but but I think more so from the startup standpoint, I think if you have a strong business model, I think at this point in the COVID situation, as Pratyush had earlier pointed out, also I think it's important for startup entrepreneurs to start thinking about what kind of startup are you thinking about, what kind of investments would be required, what is your business model, and then move forward to figure out if government is the right partner for you for your initial grant or investment, or is it somebody else in the private sector? Because if it's technologically complete, it's a very unique product or invention of sort, then maybe there is a grant available with MNRE or some one of the organization. But if the business model is something related to O&M or EPC or investments or installation, then probably it's better off to reach to the private sector.
Yeah. In fact,
Maybe
just to apprise on the same point, Government of India have certain incubation centers at science and technology centers across India, where they would like to invite good startups to present their case, and that will be viewed by eminent scientists in those science and technology center. And if they are appealing, then there are various corporates which have tied up with science and technology park, and probably it is a matching, so it's a make matching sort of a thing. So a right deserving candidate with good technology or maybe a good business model gets a right corporate to invest into it. So Amit, it's Amit's Thakur question. So Amit, you can just look on the policies like that. Yeah, Amit Deshpande, he wanted to comment something on that point.
No, I think I mean, Srini and Pratyush touched upon. Maybe I can add again some generic points, like the governments could help with. I mean, I don't know what is being done, but from what we are seeing globally is a lot of governments are deferring the loans that the startups might have, or the small and the medium enterprises might have, or probably absorbing some of the interest rates or the interest charges for for the companies for some certain period of time, or even subsidizing or offering some coverage of salaries. This is what we are seeing in the Middle East, that the governments are covering certain salaries of employees for again till the lockdown is finished, and help with the cash flows of the startups and small and medium scale companies. So I think in general liquidity is really the key requirement of the companies to stay afloat, and if government can ensure this, I think it will really help.
Yeah. So one of the another question that we have come across is from Mr. Preetham Patil, who is on the audience. He's asked that would Indian module manufacture be more quality-wise competitive, quality-wise better, and also the price-wise competitive in the near future compared to the Chinese player? So, Srini, can you take up this?
I think given if there is a it depends on the obviously the safeguard duty had not really Mercom and other websites have already pointed out that the safeguard duty has not really helped the Indian the, getting the players to buy Indian modules specifically, but also the Indian modules have also, if you historically see, a lot of Indian module suppliers have also spent a lot of their inventory on exports, which giving with other countries putting a hit on Chinese imports, the Indian module suppliers have been benefited. So in general, probably there is a benefit for the Indian module supplier because they can actually manufacture in India and export to other markets. But also at the same time, for Indian IPP players, it has been an increase in cost by putting safeguard duty. So obviously, we'll have to see, and the technologies, whether the Indian module manufacturer can do everything from wafers and technology wise, whether it's polycrystalline, polyper, monoper, whether they are able to quickly adapt to that. If obviously there are deserving Indian manufacturers able to do that, we should encourage them and get them up to speed. But put them in a level playing field as rest of the world, so that they get even better and be able to create an industry in India.
Mhm. Yeah. So
I
also,
can, Kaushik, I
yeah.
can just add, and that's more of a, you might call it philosophical, but I think it's too naive to generalize Indian manufacturer versus Chinese manufacturer, because it's a pretty big market. The total installed capacity is about 100 gigawatts. And if you're buying a few megawatts, you have to see the individual quality assurance of that particular factory or manufacturer. We already have a few Indian manufacturers as a part of the tier one list. So they have already, proven themselves to be bankable and part of, an elite list. So I feel there is no limitation on the Indian manufacturers to really be of good quality. Yes, the question had been always on price competitiveness, and that's where I think the incentives which are being provided for manufacturing. For instance, you might recall there was a tender where Indian manufacturers had to set up both manufacturing as well as generation capacity. So these kind of
Yes.
market signals and the ability to buy from the central government side and other government side really gives a lot of impetus to domestic manufacturing and make them more competitive in the world. But ultimately, as an IPP or an investor, you will always look for the least price for the best quality. So you have to be competitive.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely the capacity building has to be in terms of gigawatt, because I recollect incidents of 2013-14 where we wanted to execute a project of 50 megawatt, and we came across a manufacturer who had recently set up his manufacturing facility. He said we have a 25 megawatt of a module production line. So I said it is going to be 2 years for you to manufacture the modules for this project. And when we talk about the timelines, as you've seen, there's a market trend or maybe a market norm, what we say, that once it is handed over to the EPC, the project should be completed between the time span of around maybe 4 to 6 months, or maybe maximum 6 months time frame. So in a 6 months time frame, if you want to have module supplies of around 50 or 100 megawatt, and now the project sizes are even 100, 200, and 3, maybe more, a bigger and bigger size. So if you want to just tie up with a single manufacturer for 200 megawatt or a 500 megawatt of a module supply, definitely we have to see the manufacturing capability is to the mark of gigawatt, maybe around 2.5 or 3 gigawatt of a player would be able to do justice to those type of supplies. So that's a thing. Definitely, a few players have been trying, but I see the monopop facilities also for coming up for cell manufacturing, where we can see the higher module efficiency, and maybe let's see how we come up. But still, whatever the way the China is moving, the India is definitely not moving. Few steps have been taken, so let's see how we can be more competitive over time. We have few more questions from the audience. They want to know the prospects on the microgrid side. What is the Indian government policy as on date, and whether the micro, if you are a pure play microgrid player, can you support your venture on microgrid business model? Amit, can you highlight on this aspect?
Yes, Kaushik, I'll try it. I mean, I'm not fully up to date with the policies for microgrids in India, so to say, but
Mhm.
I mean, the other geographies that I'm closely working with, for example, in the Middle East and Africa, uh, it has been very well received, and especially with the increasing let's say penetration of storage, because I think there was also a question about how storage is going to grow. So I would like to combine these two topics while I answer this. Is what we see is there is increasing growth of electric vehicles, right? So more and more electric vehicles are being sold. We talked about decentralization. That's definitely a trend that's happening, and with decentralization, microgrids is definitely something that comes in as very effective. When you have multiple sources of power, you can optimize it, you can have storage, and basically it gives you a lot of flexibility to uh, deliver the right solution to the customer. So uh, microgrids and storage for me definitely are, there's a huge potential for it, and I'm not sure what the Indian government has policies around it, but definitely it's something that they have to look into seriously.
Uh, we have a list of questions, but I think there are some of the questions which we already answered, and going by the time frame, I think we have limitation of time as well. So what we can do is, we have noted all the questions from the audience side. We will post it across to the individual. We will mark it, and those questions which we can have a reply on a private window also. Uh, just we have around 5 to 7 minutes now to close the session. So I would request to have a concluding remarks for the session. I think we can have it from Mr. Srini first.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me as part of this panel. I think to conclude, I would say that, obviously now is wait and watch times with COVID and how things pan out and the lockdown and everything else. But one thing we have seen that the solar assets that are currently in operational have not been impacted by any of these linkages and supply linkages, and it's a sustainable way of generating energy. This is something that India needs in the post-COVID space, post-COVID environment. And as soon as the open, as soon as the post-COVID lockdown ends, this is an area that we all as an industry have to come back and ask the government to give full impetus to it so that we can all start getting busy, create more employment. There is any EPC work or construction involves a lot of labor, local labor, and also specialized labor. So I think this is something that India will need as a sector to push, and it creates multiple other business opportunities, not only for the contractors, but also supply of equipment, supply of cable, supply of electrical stuff. So it really can help in pushing the economy forward. And I think it is renewable energy, and it also meets the goal of climate change and energy security for the country.
Yeah. Pratyush, maybe have remarks from your end?
Sure. Thanks a lot. I'm really pleased to be a part of this panel. Very interesting discussion. I'm personally a climate optimist, which means that I feel that the world will organize itself to really take care of this climate change problem, and renewable energy is going to be a very, very big participant in that. So, as the topic for this session is future of jobs, I think if you're looking for future of jobs, this is the industry to be in. This is the
Yes.
industry with a lot of opportunity on all kind of skill sets which you have or you want to inculcate. There is a significant intent from the policymakers, financial providers, industry, uh, personnel to really grow from where we are. And as we discussed, there are so many avenues where growth is there. So I would say, really look at this industry seriously. And I'm quite optimistic that we'll have a lot of opportunity to grow and to learn and contribute in the industry. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Pratyush. Maybe from Amit.
Sure. So, I think I would just like to make two quick points as part of the ending remark, because I'm sure there's a question on a lot of listeners' mind about how the low oil prices impact the renewable energy sector. And I think, the short answer is, in the past, oil prices have dropped and it has not really directly affected the renewable energy investments or sector. And contrary, it has always, helped the sector. So that should not be a question on the mind. This sector will definitely grow. And second is, I think, for India as a country, I think the government has set up a ambitious goal of achieving a 5 trillion of economy by 2025, I believe. And this sector can play a very important role in growing you know the country's GDP towards this 5 trillion mark, by contributing to the GDP, by creating employment, as well as ensuring that the development reaches to the rural areas. Because as you see, most of the renewable energy projects are located in remote and renewable areas, and it brings employment and growth uniformly, and it helps in social welfare as well. So thank you, Kaushik, from my end, and for Mehul to having me on this panel. It's a very, very wonderful discussion.
Yeah, sincere thanks to MDEC. Mr. Mehul has been instrumental in organizing this wonderful panel discussion. Let me thank once again Mr. Srini, Mr. Amit, Mr. Pratyush to be on this panel and sharing your views and prospects about the renewable energy and energy domain, and sharing the employment prospects that are available in this sector. Though we have COVID-19 impact on this sector, but as a sector, we are all positive. There is a huge way to go ahead. We have to achieve big milestone and renewable energy targets. And as Pratyush said, he's renewable energy optimistic, and definitely there's a lot of employment prospects for all those who are with the renewable energy industry and the young minds who are looking to get into renewable energy segment. Once again, I thank all the panelists, Mr. Mehul and MDC staff to work upon this panel discussion. And today is Akshay Tritiya. Wish you all a very happy Akshay Tritiya. Thank you, and stay home, stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaushik.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.